Well, hello everybody, and welcome to my interview with co-founder of mBraining, Grant Soosalu. And today we're in Rainy Reservoir. We're not in lovely Locksport.
This is true. And for the last 2 days it has been very misty and silvery out there, which is always nice to be inside doing research, I figure.
Fair enough.
Yep.
But you didn't get to Reservoir directly from Locksport, right? You came from overseas.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a roundabout trip. Locksport to New Zealand.
That's about
back to
15 hours.
Back to Reservoir, yeah, exactly. With a couple of days of training and then a couple of days of research added in, yeah. So we ran the pilot. I flew across and with Professor Suzanne Henwood, we ran the pilot for the embed leadership decision making program, which is absolutely fantastic. We had a great group of people and they absolutely loved it, getting some amazing, fantastic testimonials out of it, and people are reporting in that within a day of doing that program that their decision making in as leaders in their organisations have changed transformationally. So
wow,
yeah, that's cool.
That is really cool. So hopefully what that means is we're going to get some leaders at the top end making wiser decisions, affecting everybody in an awesome way instead of in a not so awesome way.
Yeah, exactly. A bit more wisdom in the way we higher order leadership in the way we lead on the planet, and it starts in organisations because pretty much everyone works somewhere.
Yeah, adding a little bit of heart into organisations is not a bad thing.
You'd be thinking, wouldn't you? Bringing your humanity, your human spirit to work, and really bringing the human spirit of people in the workplace, in the organisation, because there's no such thing. Let's denominalise organisation. There's organisings. There are people organising together, and to be able to bring the whole of them, not just from the head up, or as the research, because this is a solidly research-based program. I looked at the last decade or more, over 500 papers on leadership decision-making, and what that, especially in VUCA environments, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous times that we all live in, and because of the nature of exponential change, the rate of change of knowledge that's going on in the world, of where humanity is at in terms of how knowledge is growing. We're right on the edge of the vertical of the exponential curve, and we're seeing that as in the massive changes in our world and our organisations. We've got 7.2 billion on the way to predicted 11 billion humans on the planet, all doing massive exponential change that's just completely changing the nature of the fabric of society and how we do business and the interconnected and global village, etc. So that our decisions, where previously we may have got away with head-based decisions, because the research shows that in simple environments you can just use a cognitive approach, but in complex environments you have to draw on deeper intuitive abilities, and the researchers imbue it from the neck down. They know that stuff is going on in what's called embodied cognition. So they say that they've got the what, but they actually lament that they don't have the how. They don't know how to get people to be skilled in intuitive decision making. They just know that, scientifically validated, it's vitally important. So of course this is where mBit steps in, because what we've done is synthesised and pulled together all of the work from the neuroscience of the heart, the neuroscience of the enteric nervous system, the gut brain, along with the behavioural modelling on all of this, with a focus and application on leadership decision making, coaching and personal evolution, knowing that these neural networks have neuroplasticity, and that if you put the right focus in the right way on the right competencies, integrate them, you build the neural circuits. The autonomic nervous system has been shown to have neuroplasticity. So you build the superhighway of communication and control between them. You start to truly emerge what we pop out of the womb. And so I think it's one of our previous conversations we had this. We pop out of the womb. Children are highly intuitive and very integrated. We systematically, with our education system, educate the head and diseducate from the neck down. And then we put people in organisations, tell them they have to check out their heart and their gut at the door. Or if they use, as the research shows, if they use their from the neck down, they try to hide that they used from the neck down. So they use decision support tools like Trago analysis, KT analysis, things like that, these analysis tools. But the analysis tools actually require you to create criteria and weightings on criteria. Well, where do you think they get the criteria and the weightings from criteria? It emerges out of their intuitions.
Right.
So they use their intuitive ability, but they use it dysfunctionally and not really believing in it, having faith in it, understanding what's going on. Most people think that this is a pump and this is some stinky plumbing.
Yeah.
And yet the research coming out again and again, and some really cool research coming out in the last few months that shows that, like, if you cut the vagus nerve, it changes courage and fear behaviours. We've done this animal models, of course, because we can't ethically go and cut human vagus nerve, though that used to be the one of the techniques of choice
one
for
of my participants at the coach certification
exactly.
had his vagus nerve.
Yeah, vagotomy. That used to be one of the operations of choice for if you had bad ulcers, until they proved, and it was an Australian researcher, doctor, who proved that it's actually largely due to a bacteria. And so they don't do vagotomies anymore. Thank goodness, because when you do speak to people who've had vagotomies, do behavioural modelling work, you know that their lives have been impacted in all sorts of ways that align with the competencies that the research, common factor analysis, the research that we did showed what are the core competencies, prime functions of the heart brain, the gut brain, and the head brain. How do they work? How do they communicate? How do they align? And of course, more recently, on my work on the embed master coaching program, which will be coming out either piloted at the end of this year, or certainly we've already booked the dates, piloted in the UK early next year, which is exciting. So, and for people who might be watching this in a couple of years' time, we better say we're talking about 2016 as the because we're currently in 2015. So, and for the book I'm writing at the moment called Embed Advancing, and one of the things I did was I looked at the autonomic nervous system as if it's the researchers in the field of the ANS say that it is a complex adaptive intelligencing system that does intelligent processing and memory. Only a couple of them are saying it has all the hallmarks of a brain, so I'm not going to say it is a brain because we only go where neuroscience goes, but for the sake of being able to understand its prime functions and core competencies, I'm acting as if it's a brain, given that we know the researchers are all definitely saying it's an intelligencing system. So let's not get too fussy about brain, intelligencing system, whatever you want to call it. Forget the label, let's just act as if it's a domain of intelligence in the human body, which it absolutely is, and look at its prime functions, core competencies. And then from a coaching perspective, what are the indicators? How would you calibrate? How do you know when the process is autonomic, etc., versus a heart, gut, head? So some interesting stuff coming out, some cool and interesting techniques coming out of that really take the coaching to that next level of mastery. And that'll be coming out for the embed community, which will be fantastic.
It will be fantastic. I'm looking forward to it, especially since it's been a while since I sat in one of your particular trainings with you there. So I'm not sure if I'll get to UK to do it, but
I'm hoping to do one in Australia before. I'd like to pre-pilot here in Australia before we go and run.
Well, that'd be lovely, because since you're an Aussie and you live here.
So I kind of figure, in my backyard, I should look after, should's an interesting word, I'd love to look after all the wonderful coaches and trainers who live and have supported embed in the early days, because it's about a community thing, and I think community is all about support.
Well, it's all about, for me, it's all about learning something really amazing that really helps and is not very difficult to achieve, right? So the outcome...
Profoundly simple, right?
Yeah, one of the outcomes is, our outcomes are so simple. Once you understand the process, it works a lot. That's why I'm very interested at a later stage to hear more about what you did in New Zealand. But just to touch on that a little bit. So you've gone in... So later on, I imagine these courses being run to corporates and leaders coming in and understanding that, okay, there's another way to communicate than perhaps what they've been doing at the moment, and that includes the heart and the gut. Which brings me to chapter 6.
Yes.
Which brings me to chapter 6 about neural integration blocks. So perhaps some of the people that were at the course experienced this process, learnt about mBraining, learnt about the heart and the gut and the actual benefits that they have if they're able to access those intelligences and use them during decision making. Perhaps they've come across a block every once in a while in connecting to one of those intelligences. It was just happening, they didn't know, and as a result they were potentially classified as being heartless or gutless. But here's this leader at the top of their field, a CEO or whatever they are, manager, leading a whole bunch of people, achieving outcomes, doing a whole bunch of things, but still potentially have people labeling them as heartless or gutless. I don't reckon that would sit well with most people. And I feel that they may not know. So I want to talk about neural integration blocks. What blocks somebody from connecting to their heart and to their gut other than being educated like that for the majority of their lives to just be, head based.
Yeah. So kind of make the differentiate between NICs, neural integrative constraints, and blocks. What's the difference? The constraints, for example, we know we've got the 5 constraints, and where one brain is used to the exclusion of another, or 2 or more brains are in conflict with one another, or one's got a voice but it's been swamped by another, etc., which are not really blocks. It's just like you said, there's potentially ways in which people have made decisions in their life. Because, for example, that case study of one of my clients where she had her heart broken as a young teenager, a very crucial, emotional time for her around, something that was linked deeply to her values, deeply to romance and love, and ultimately impacted her at a core identity level, at a gut level, and her head and her gut. She made the decision never to trust her heart again.
Right.
So it's not like she had a neural integrated block. She could still speak to her heart. She just chose never to talk to it. So it was definitely, 2 brains used to the exclusion of another, and it was an example of one brain used to do the job of another, because she transferred all of her relational affect and how she would value things into food, into gut, into taste.
Just before you go down there, what might she have said? Let's just assume that we know. What might somebody have said during that time to completely disconnect from their heart?
Oh, they just make a decision within themselves.
Yeah.
A decision is a set of neural processes. So every time if you think about it, a decision you make, even if it's to go and have lunch at a certain place, that's it. I'm going to have a pie today. Or Aussies, I'm going to have a pie today. We're not, by the way, but we'll be healthy. But let's just say we made that decision. You made that decision now. You go down the shop, and even if I tried to walk you into the sushi shop or something else, if you decided you were going to have a pie, so it's a set of neural weightings, neural decisions that have occurred to create, effectively, a future memory. You've decided in the future I'm going to do this regardless. So when the trigger point comes of we walk past a shop, your neural firings go, food, pie, food, pie. Well, it's just, you can do the same thing with I'll never listen to my heart again.
Right. Wow.
And even if the heart's sending signals up, of course, your head brain and the gut brain's going, I'm sorry, we got so damaged by your decisions, it hurts so much.
Right.
We don't open those floodgates ever again. Not going there, not happening.
Wow.
Of course, we know what with neuroplasticity, neurons that bind together, wire together, neurons that are out of sync, unlink. So, over time, downregulates the heart neural network.
Right.
Use it or lose it. So, effectively, it can, like a nick done deep enough over time, can transfer into a nip.
Right.
It'll literally be a block where you go to talk to something and there's not much there, and here's where a nick could turn into a nib. So let's just think about, I like to think about this as individual people. I love the anecdote, not an anecdote, but the story, true story, that Alice Soroki tells. Alice, you might remember, she's one of our interviews. She wrote a book called Gut Wisdom. So she's a colonics therapist, and she had discovered just by experience that when her clients came in, that it was like, she said, it was like 2 people came in, like 2 souls came in on the table. And since reading mBraining, which she, by the way, loves, and gave some wonderful testimonial for, she now realises there are 3 souls. There's like a finer distinction on this. There are 3 intelligences on the table. But she discovered that there were these 2 people who walk in, the head and the gut, which with colonics therapy, she's got to cleanse them out. She said she's like a big biofeedback system. Right? She can look in the container under the table and go,
right.
Person that body size should have typically
X.
that much stuff in the container after they finished. So she looked and go, not everything came out yet. And as she had discovered, and the research backs this up, there's a strong comorbidity, as they say in psychology, comorbidity or co-occurrence, correlation between head-based psychological disorders, disorders that we would imbue into the head brain, and gut issues. So a lot of people with neuroticism, obsessive compulsive disorders, even schizophrenia, a lot of people with serious psychic disorders, DSM-based psych disorders, end up having impacted bowels. They have serious gut issues.
Right.
So it's not just in the head brain. A lot of these issues are impacted in the enteric nervous system, in the gut brain as well.
Right.
In fact, some of these head-based disorders, as research is showing, actually come out of the gut. You know, if you look at Dr. McBride's work on GAPS, gut and psychology syndrome, etc., there's a lot of stuff that if you get the gut awry and the gut brain awry, it impacts the head, and that you can fix people up from a perspective of, you can give somebody who's got depression, which we'd normally view as a head brain psychological disorder, and give them a probiotic and get their gut right, and their depression goes away, right? So in that way we can say the head brain and gut brain are deeply entwined. What she discovered was that if she communicated in certain ways to the gut brain, it would actually help them with their head-based disorders. Their psychoses, things like that, would go away for a period of time when she had their gut right.
Wow.
And she learnt that you had to talk to the head in a certain way and talk to the gut in a certain way, with forms of communication that the gut responds to.
Yeah.
So I like to think about in that way, you know, that if you're analysing something like NIBS, neural integrated blocks, how the brains block from communicating with each other, I like to think about it as if, what would happen if you had three people there,
right,
and you gave them this communication pattern? What would likely happen? So in the case of, say, somebody says, the head and the gut go, we're never trusting you, third person, the heart, ever again. Right? That's fine. The heart keeps trying to say stuff, they're going, your lips are moving, but I'm hearing la 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 la, right? Now over time, what would you, if you were that third person, if you were the heart, what would you do?
You'd feel discouraged.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Although that would be a gut-based thing. You'd probably feel disheartened, right?
You'd feel disheartened
You'd
as well.
feel very disheartened, and you would lose trust in the others. You'd lose heart, right?
Yeah.
And you'd stop trusting them. Now, the three of you come along as a party because you're all stuck in one body. You come along to a coach who says, all right, head, go talk to the heart.
No, not
And the head has been not listening to the heart for the last 10 years of your life, and says, hey heart, what do you truly feel? What do you truly value? What do you connect with in this? And the heart goes, you know what, buddy? No offense for what I'm about to do, but you know, this is probably what would happen. Be like, that's what I'm going to say to you. Right? Because you haven't been listening to me for the last 10 years. And I'm actually down-regulated now. I've actually got less neurons now. I've really, you know what? In my tiny little squeaky voice, I go, bugger off. and now we've got a nib. Now we've got a block.
Yeah.
The heart is blocking. So it starts as a nick, can end up as a nib.
Yeah. Now we're smiling, we're laughing about this because of the way you're
Yeah,
describing
I'm telling it as a bit of a funny story, but it's not funny for people.
it. Could be serious, right?
Very, but well, this
Could have
particular
implications.
person I was coaching, working with, doing some work with and action research with, actually, it was because in the very early days, and she'd been in hospital with effectively morbid obesity. She actually had to have her gallstones removed the size of tennis balls.
Wow.
Had to have her gallbladder removed because it was so damaged by the gallstones. And basically she'd been consuming, she'd been using her gut to do what the heart needed to do, so she valued everything through her gut, and as that means everything gets represented what the gut represents, which is food. So she would eat life up, she would eat people up, and she would eat a lot.
Right.
So she was a voracious consumer of life, consume, to eat, rather than a heart-based valuing. So she showed me a photo, because I'd only ever known her as a fairly large lady, but showed me a photo on her iPhone of when she was young, she was 15, before this event happened. And she didn't connect it all up, right? And took me to the coaching, she hadn't connected up.
Wow.
Because I said to her, you know, we're working on, because she wanted to work on the fact that she's come out of hospital, she has to change her diet, etc. She has to change her eating patterns, and we were working on that. So we were talking about, so was there just checking, you know, we've always been, you know, had a weight as an issue, has always been. And she said, no, actually, showed me this photo of, when she was 15, she was slender, little thing. You wouldn't know that was me back then. I went, actually, no, I would never have guessed. So what happened between there and then? You know, was there something that was, that when you look back at your life, what was the change? And you now I think about it, now my head brain gets in touch with the memory of it. Oh yeah, I had this thing where my heart was completely broken. And when the way she explained it, I won't go into the details, but
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, that makes complete sense.
Right.
And so over time, very hard to reconnect with something that's going, I'm not talking to you now, you really hurt me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing to talk about the neural integration blocks, because at some point we may have done something, it may have been so long ago, and we're not aware of what
could have happened to you. You're bitten by a dog as a child, sort of story. You might not even remember it. Or in the, it's not as quiet here. Have you even noticed that in Locksport, we get the birds singing, but in beautiful downtown Melbourne, we get trucks backing up and all sorts of noises and music. So apologies for any background noises you're hearing, but this is what happens in suburban Melbourne. It's all happening here. So so coming back to that, you have experiences where the head brain can actually delete the experience. It was so traumatic or horrible that memories are suppressed. And I've had people in my life who I was very close to who have had this, and only after years of psychotherapy have uncovered things that were so traumatic for them as a child that got completely deleted. Now, if your head doesn't even know something happened to you, as in it knows, but it's suppressing the memory from conscious awareness, you try to access something, and those neural networks are going, I'm sorry, I'm not eating fish and chips, I'm only eating pies. No, pie shop, not fish shop. Then it becomes a challenge for typical coaching models, etc., to have to deal with, or even psychotherapeutic models, though mBit is not a psychotherapeutic model. Let's be absolutely clear about this. Even if we use some of these examples, I'm using them as examples because of the fact that I've got a psych background, etc. But mBit is for coaching. If somebody has a psychological issue, they should seek or a medical issue, or etc. They should seek the appropriate healthcare professional or etc. to work with. Not that mBit coaching couldn't be used by them, with them. I know some psychotherapists who, hypnotherapists, etc., who use mBit as well. It's absolutely complementary modality. They love it. They believe it adds all sorts of power, especially when it's dealing with nibs. Because if you don't realise that, if you're trying to do therapy and you think that it's largely in the head, and the body's kind of... Because remember what happened with Descartes, the 1600s, this Cartesian split, as it's called. Descartes split psyche from soma, and said that the mind was separate from the body. So we end up with psychology as a separate field to medicine. Medicine deals with the body, psychology deals with the mind. Well, the mind is in the head, which is in the body, so there is an overlap. And you get psychiatry, which is an overlap of medicine and psychology in certain aspects, very pharmacological, etc. But these are not separate systems, and you get somebody who's got depression, but it's depression because it's something happened at the gut level, which is actually because their microbiome is completely screwed up because they had...
pies.
No, worse than that. They got given a little penicillin pill. They got given some the research I put out yesterday, and I saw you forwarded on into your network. You have antibiotics as a child. It completely disrupts your microbiome. Your microbiome never gets fixed. It leads to issues much later on that are medical issues as adults. You have certain forms of medical problems as an adult that are immune functions. Not recognising that the immune system is largely controlled by gut, brain and autonomic nervous system. The ANS literally synapses down onto the immune system in places in the body. So there's huge overlaps between what's going on in the gut brain and when you talk about the gut brain, the enteric nervous system, the gut, the enteric nervous system literally sends its nerve signals out into the microbiome. It's connected with and communicating with through messenger molecules and neural circuits that are deeply enmeshed. This stuff is squishy and like a garden, and it's not all like an engineering set of wires that only go so far, etc. It's very organic. And so the microbiome is is part of the extension. Just like the garden. When you go and buy a house, which by the way I believe you've just recently done, right? You go and buy a new house, the house is not separate from the land it's on. And the land it's on is not separate from the trees and the gardens and the things that are there, and the quality of living in any particular place is intrinsically entwined with the beautiful garden and the trees. And if you just had concrete, it's a very different world, a built environment than a green environment. And there's a lot of work on things that's called like blue mind, which is and green mind, which is the impact of nature
Yes.
of water and nature on humanity, and even to the point where if they bring plants into a hospital room, it increases healing time. There's research on this, validated research on this. So
Increases healing time?
yeah, as in it increases healing speed, decreases healing time. It makes people heal quicker.
Yeah, wow.
They get over stuff quicker if they're in an environment that has some nature, because we evolved.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same.
It's an ecosystem, right?
It's an ecosystem.
And if you
an
alter the
informational
ecosystem, there's long-term side effects we don't know about.
Complex, non-linear, systematic effects that you just cannot predict ahead of time. What's called emergence in non-linear dynamics. So you get these emergence, and this is why if you think that everything's happening up in the head, and you're trying to work with it at a head level, either as a coach, as a leader, or as a therapist, or even as a doctor, and you don't recognise that there are actual embodied intelligencing processes that are occurring neurochemically, endocrinally, etc., in all sorts of complex ways with feedback and feed-forward mechanisms. And you try to put your focus through your communication, whether it's therapy or coaching, at the head level, you're missing the boat. The leverage point is not in the head. The leverage point is where it's embodied, where it's felt, where it's experienced, where those communication patterns are represented in. And we know if somebody's feeling fear, you say point to where you feel the fear. No one points to limbic structures in the head brain. They don't point to their frontal lobes. They go, I'm feeling the fear here. No, I feel it in my gut. It's butterflies or whatever in my gut. So the leverage point for change is at the point of embodiment. That's the communication process. That's where those neural networks, and because it's not just plumbing, but it is a complex adaptive neural network with the number of neurons in the gut. It's the same size as a cat's brain.
Yes.
Double the size of a dog's brain. That if you look at the complex behaviour you get out of a cat or a dog, the memory, the learning, the communication patterns, the socialisation, the detection of threat and the response to it, the level of intelligence and learning in 500 million neurons is immense.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got in the gut, so in our gut brain. So it's not surprising that the head brain offloads certain forms of communication, so around fear and courage. If you cut the vagus so that for the signals going up from the gut to the head, changes behaviourally what you would imbue as behaviours decisions that would normally be made in the head. This is completely, well validated, controlled, experimental stuff that's coming out in the last 6 months that totally backs up this beautiful model of how you can profoundly, simply, with a set of tools that anyone can use, coach, lead, do personal empowerment in your own life, start to take control of your own human spirit. So now when it comes to something like not nice sort of loop on this, because I guess we're getting to the point where we've been talking for a while and we don't want these to be too long. But I just flew back from New Zealand where I ran the first leadership decision making course. It's a 2-day program. You can't do in 2 days what you can do in 4 days. In 4 days we cover nibs, NIs, a whole bunch of things in great depth, calibration, etc. All things you need as a coach to be able to come out with the competencies, to be able to coach someone into deep alignment at head, heart, gut level and get that emergence of wisdom in their life.
Yes.
In 2 days, what you can do is get people to not do it for others. You could do group decision making, but it's not about a coaching model. You don't learn a coaching model in 2 days. What you learn is the ability to tap into your heart and gut intelligences through the autonomic nervous system balance to open up the pathways of communication and control around the prime functions, understanding what classes of communication you'll get intuitively, and start to surface through this now, opening up the gates of interoceptive awareness to be able to surface this stuff and appreciate it, recognise it, and be aware of what nicks your constraints that you've been operating out of, because they're just patterns and preferences in neural networks, and what cognitive biases exist in evolved cognitive biases that in decision making all neural networks do. So to resource yourself out of those, be aware of them, and to tap into that wisdom, that innate wisdom. That's fantastic. Somebody comes across a nib in that model. In 2 days, you can't teach people how to be able to self-coach themselves out of nibs.
Yes.
In fact, for something like nibs, when you're in the process, you can't get meted to the process.
Yeah.
When you're in a nib, when you're nibbing, there's no way you got the neurological resources to both be doing that. For whatever reason, you're bitten by a dog, whatever happened, that you've learnt to do your neural processing this way. While you're in that, you can't go med it to yourself and then get yourself out of that. This is the time when you need to go to a professional coach, an embed coach who has the skill and experience to be able to coach you,
to
facilitate past that. And as we know, there are different classes of nibs, and they need different ways of being addressed. Some of them including generative tasking, where you've got to go and literally re-educate and maybe regrow neural connections and neural plasticity. So the idea with nibs is you need to learn about them in depth. You can't just read a chapter in a book. We cover it in much more depth, as you know, experientially in the workshop. If you experience a nib in some way in your life, if you find you're trying to communicate, you've read mBraining, you've heard some of these talks, you start talking to your heart and your gut, using the language, being aware of the communication patterns and processes these neural networks use, and you find one of them is just not talking. You cannot not communicate. Not communicating is a communication itself. If Bill asks me a question and I just refuse to answer, I'm telling Bill something.
Enough said.
Exactly, so to speak. So, if you're not hearing something from one of your neural networks, and it can be you're not hearing from something from one neural network only in certain contexts. It can be around a class of prime functions. It can be around a class of core competencies for that brain. It can be very contextual to only about this. I refuse to talk about us having pies for lunch. End of story. And I'll talk about anything else, but not pies for lunch. So it can be very specific. But if you're experiencing that, that's a signal or an indicator that you go, time to go get some good coaching. Because unless you remove that block, you're not going to open up the pathways to all the things that in your neural networks work as semantic connections. In all the semantics, the meanings, the connections and meaning, outside of conscious awareness, that particular neural processing does for you, and its secondary gains and all sorts of stuff. Unless you can clear that, you're not going to move forward in your life around that context. You're going to be stuck in a pattern, because that's what patterning systems do. Patterning systems hold patterns constant. The water just keeps running down the channel. Every time it rains, the water runs down the channel, just keeps digging it deeper. Neurons are fire together, wire together. So if you find a nib, now's the time. Get a good MBIT coach. There's plenty on as you know, on our website.
And in so many countries around the world now.
No,
so we're talking about
20 countries.
Oh, 20?
Yeah, we've got.
Wow,
we actually have trainers, MBIT trainers across 20 countries. That means they're training coaches, and we're actually starting to get online databases of coaches per country. So in Italy, one of the beautiful MBIT trainers over in Italy has set up a web page and is doing an Italian-based version of the spreadsheet of the coaches. So if you're in Italy, you can go look in Italian, because obviously I've got it in English on the mBraining.com website. You go to mBraining.com website, go find an MBIT coach, go get an MBIT coach. Or come do a coach cert. As part of a coach cert, you actually get coached, and you'll build you become part of the community of MBIT coaches. And we do a lot of the MBIT trainers and master trainers run peer coaching sessions, study groups, etc., where you come along and you coach each other. So it's a fantastic opportunity to be able to really evolve your own life, evolve your own neural circuits, evolve your own mBraining, your connections of your multiple brains.
Work out where your blocks are.
Work out where your blocks are, pattern interrupt them, install new ways of neural firing that bring your human spirit alive.
Beautiful, Grant. Before we wrap up, because we've definitely gone over time.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to talk
Good at that, eh?
We are. But that's all right. It's all good stuff, and we need to go over time sometimes, because that's just the way that it is.
That's our setting line,
I want to get my foot on the footstool there. I want to talk briefly about the MBIT coaching workbook. You put that together a little while after you wrote mBraining.
About 12 months after.
And tell me a little bit about it. Tell me what the purpose behind it is. So, as a coach, I understand that these are available to coaches.
Absolutely. Well, available to anyone really, but because you can buy them off Amazon or our website. But coaches get a substantial discount on them. The idea, what I wanted was a tool that coaches could use, because remember we talk about MBIT in the MBIT coaching cert, we talk about it's MBIT coaching. That ing makes a difference. It's not a one-shot deal. You don't wave your magic MBIT coach wand over the multiple brains, smack them on the head and go, you are evolved. It doesn't work that way. These are neural circuits that wire together.
Fire together.
Exactly. Or it's the other way around. Either way.
I
actually think it's a nested loop that so because ones that wire together do fire together. So it's an expression exactly of what I'm about to say, which is that there's a series of, if you look at the MBIT roadmap, it's actually a competency hierarchy. I'm a competency-based instructional designer. It's one of the things I did for many, many years, criterion reference instructional design. And you can look at competency hierarchy and go, to get to the competency of wisdom, what do you need? And you need competencies in all of these things. And we coach people in these things, but understanding neuroplasticity, you know that when you coach somebody, when they start to do new ways of neural firing, neurons that fire together, wire together, well, neurons that wire together then fire together. It builds a competency, a loop in your life, a new pattern. So the idea would be, somebody comes in and you say, so what do you want this coaching session? Well, that's great. That's one way of doing coaching. But you know, if you're really looking at a level of mastery in life, if you were an Olympic swimmer and you go get a world level coach to start coaching you, if you're a football team, you know, soccer team, whatever, you bring in a coach. The coach doesn't come in and say, all right team, tell me what you think I should coach you in. Tell me what we should work on. It doesn't work that way. You get a coach because they've got expertise in looking at the outcomes you want to deliver on and go, well, you're an Olympic level runner? All right, this is the biomechanics we're going to work on. This is the stuff about metabolism and energy. These are the ways we're going to resource you. I'm going to get you to do these things. It's not that they wouldn't ask, so what do you think your strengths and weaknesses are? But that's not their focus. They don't. Now, in a lot of coaching, the model is the client comes in and goes, what would you want to work on? Now we go, what they want to work on comes from a problem state. So we want to shift, as Einstein said, you can't solve the problems you created from the state you created them. So we take people to emergence, up the roadmap to their wisdom, and what comes out usually is a different outcome, or a more fully ecological outcome, a wiser outcome. And they get aligned around how to do it. It's fantastic. We've seen the profound changes that happen in people's lives. But we're starting from a model of present state to desired outcome, which is what a lot of coaching, etc. do, that form. But I actually think that there's a different way at a master's level, mastery level, where the person comes in and you understand the deep nature of these neural circuits and what it means to be the highest expressing. And you go, what we're going to do is we're just going to do generative change, not remedial change. So it's not about necessarily what you think you want from this problem state. You don't even know from the highest expression of you. And it's not even about, let's go to the highest expression of you, ask you what you want. It's about, we know what you want to bring the human spirit alive. So let's start working with you on the competencies that make up you bringing the emergence of you and your wisdom into your world. And along the way we can work on in particular outcomes and things and stuff that emerges, because that's what that stuff will emerge. We do specific embed coaching. But it became a framework. So the whole point of this is to create a framework of exercises. You start working from the beginning at the autonomic mode, autonomic reactivity, your communication processes, your alignment processes. Every one of those bits of the embed roadmap and the chapters that we're working through becomes really fruitful area working at a competency-based level to build those neural competencies. And whatever's causing the patterns and blocks of you, but if every one of us has a propensity to autonomic mode. Some are more parasympathetic. It's called autonomic space in the most recent research. You live somewhere in the autonomic space of parasympathetic, sympathetic. And an autonomic reactivity, when something happens, you respond. Fight or flight, they call it sympathetic dominance. If somebody lives with a largely parasympathetic, in somewhat level of sort of depressed, very low on the sympathetic, parasympathetic, but when they get triggered by a stressor, they go immediately to fight rather than flight. It's different to somebody who does flight rather than fight.
Way different,
So someone goes into fear, or someone else goes into anger when they're in a stressor. Now, that's fruitful area for embed coaching. Your autonomic mode and reactivity, there's something going on in your neural patterns, your genetics, your life history, you're being bitten by a dog, so to speak, metaphorically, that led you to certain forms of autonomic propensity. Now, unless we can get you to be more generative and wiser in how you use your autonomic nervous system, you're going to always be coming back to the coach to ask, oh, I've got another, you get the same class of problems. Oh, I've got someone I'm angry with, my wife. Oh, I've got someone I'm angry with at work. Oh, I've got one of my suppliers. Oh, you've got this constant process of angering because you've got a propensity to it. So let's work on what's going on within the wiser you of how you do your autonomic mode to bring awareness to the system, meta self-consciousness and self-awareness at a deep head, heart, gut level, learning how to pattern interrupt, less than functional patterns, and then installation through generative tasking of new, more generative ways of using your neural circuits, your multiple brains. And
on that, we are going to end this episode. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you got a lot out of it. If you wanted to get more information, even after today's episode and the episodes you've already watched, you can go to mBraining.com and you can get a whole bunch of tools, a whole bunch of ways that you can learn about mBraining and learn about the upcoming courses. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.